I'm Casey Blackmore with the Kenton County Public Library, along with Mike Bloom, also of Kenton County Public Library, and today is May 30th, 2019. I will be interviewing Kenneth Klingenberg at Kenton County Public Library at the Independence Branch. This interview is being conducted for the Kenton County Public Library Veterans History Project in conjunction with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. So good afternoon, Mr. Klingenberg. Could you please state your full name, birth date, your branch of service, highest rank attained, and dates of service? I can go back.
My name is Kenneth J. Klingenberg, Sr.
Your birth date?
4/18/25, and I was a staff sergeant.
Okay. And what were your dates of service?
How much?
Your dates of service. Were you in the service? What years?
3.
Okay. Sure. Just to get started, we always do like a little biographical information. So when and where were you born?
I was born in Cincinnati, and then my parents moved to Dayton, Kentucky. He opened a business there.
Okay, yeah, the hardware store, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, yes, well known in this area. And what were your parents' names?
Rose and Ralph.
Okay. And did they always work for the hardware store? What were their occupations throughout their life?
Well, he had another occupation, but during the Depression, things got really bad. And so his two brothers told him about, what to do this. So he did. He opened a store.
Yeah.
My mother never worked there.
And did you have any siblings?
I have one brother. He was 7 years older than I am, and he came back from the war and became an MD.
Okay. And what was your home life like growing up? What was your home life like?
Growing up? Well, pretty normal. I went to grade school, and after grade school, I went to high school. And in our junior year, 2 other fellows and myself decided we were going to save the world and join the Army.
Yeah.
So we went, and the fellow said, you have to go to the board. So we did, and they said, when you graduate from high school, come back. So we went back to school, and then the state passed a law that if you had taken all of the subjects that were necessary for graduation and passed them, you can get out of school, at any time and join the service. So they wanted to stay then until after they graduated. So I took it, and I went to Xavier in Cincinnati, and I know I was 1 or 2 years there. 2 semesters there.
Yeah.
And so you want me to go on, or?
If you want to. Where did you go to school at? Which high school? Did you go to Cincinnati in high school or somewhere in Kentucky?
It was Newport Catholic.
Newport Catholic, okay. Did you do any extracurriculars there, sports, anything like that?
Not in those days.
Yeah.
So I did play sports. We were in a league, and I was a pitcher. And then for a while before we went into service, I played semi-pro. The place, it had quite a few teams, like Wiedemann Beer and grocery stores and this and that.
Yeah. And
I enjoyed it. And but when I came home, I said, no, I'm going to get my education and go to work.
Yeah. What did you study in college? Or
business and economics.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's back up if we can. You would have been 16 when Pearl Harbor happened.
That's about right, I guess.
Did you know about the war and what was going on before then, or was that when you learned about what was going on?
No, from time to time, I'd read the newspaper and this and that a little bit. And then we heard things on the radio. And then we finally joined. and the local, there was, in Fort Thomas, there was a army post, and that's where we entered. And we stayed there about 2 weeks. Then we got on a train and went straight to Texas. And I was at two different camps, and I forget which one was first, but Camp Bowie and Camp Swift. The local town was it's 5,200 people. I'm sorry, it's not too far from Midland. Midland is West Texas.
Mm-hmm. So that's where you had your basic training?
That's where I had the basic training. And then when we finished our basic training, I took some special courses. And PFC, T5, and then a staff sergeant. And I got shipped out to form a new combat engineer outfit, and then that was the other fort I was at. Mm-hmm. And I'm, say, 17 years old or something, and I was the first fellow there, and the people at the camp said, "You got a 10-ton truck at the railroad station. Will you go out and get it?" So I'd never driven a 10-ton truck before.
Yeah.
So I put it in gear, and I couldn't get it out of low gear. So I drive 50, 100 feet and then let it cool off, and I finally got it back down there. But there are a lot of things I learned, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so I left the other two boys in the other outfit. We met them one time in another town, and it's around Germany surrounds it, in France, Luxembourg. Mm-hmm. And we went up there and met them before, you know, and then went back again to where we were. And before I'm getting ahead of myself, we waited ashore at the same place that D-Day. We were after D-Day, but we still had to wait ashore. And we went in an LCI, and landing craft invasion, and they put the front down. I was the third soldier off, and I went down into water, and it was over my head. Mm. And instinctively, I put my toes down and hit the bottom and came up and moved forward. So I made it, and we went on, you know, foot, and we finally got some trucks to take us into France, and then we started fighting wherever we were put. Being a small combat engineers outfit, they gave us a lot of special duty, and a lot of the duty we got was rotten, you know, was bad, was tougher. And we were in the Third Army, and there was one place where we crossed the Rhine River on boats, and it was, I forget the name of the town on the Rhine. My daughter and son-in-law went there one time. Mm. But anyway, I am completely unaware of what happened when I was there. I know there was combat, but I couldn't. And then I remember they gave us a place to stay, and we were building a bridge across the Rhine River, mm-hmm. so that the infantry could go on. And one other time we were there about 2 weeks, so we could finish the bridge, and then a number of men had to go up and drop explosives in the river to keep the Germans from blowing up the bridge after we built it. And then one time German lady took us in groups. They put us in groups. she walked by us. She claimed she had been raped by a soldier. And none of the men in our outfit were, accused. And then later, a company commander asked me to take about 6 men and about 4 o'clock in the morning and go to this address. And we went in, and there were men that were AWOL. And we went there, and the door was locked, so we took a pole and knocked the door down and went in and captured them and gave them to the police, the Army police. Then from there we went to a number of villages, and we didn't know a lot of the names of the village because they Germans tore the signs down before they left. And we went to the Holocaust, and there were 2 ones.
Yeah, I think
One was Dachau.
Outside of Munich.
Yeah, Dachau and Buchenwald.
Yeah.
And the tanks would go ahead of us, and then if there was not going to be any more combat, they'd take off, and our job was to stop and see what's going on, and then give the people water, and then the next group that would come in from the Army would help them medically and feed them and so forth. And then we followed the Second Armored Division. And after the 2 of them, we hit a number of other places. We were on the river in France, and we hit a number of men that were killed because the Germans were just across the river, Little Moselle River. And after that, we went up and we went into this village, and our job was to take the ammunition in, and we were the first ones in the village. And thank God that there wasn't any Germans, but once we got in there, they start, shelling us. And then for some reason, the commanding officer got me to go back and study blowing up certain things with, I have this thing I got from a surgeon. He stuck a knife in me by accident on the table, and my memory is bad because of that. That's what I was told by a nurse. But I'm trying to forget where. We went into a number of towns, and we couldn't remember the names because the Germans would take down the sign of the name when, to keep, we wouldn't have the information. And then we were in a couple other scraps with the Germans, and we lost people. And then Eisenhower said that the war was slowing down, so he gave a number of the outfits to take them off the lines and put some new people in there, and we could go. Then we went back to France. We were 22 miles from Paris. And of course, all the guys took off and went into Paris, except that they got me to get some men and load ammunition on a flatbed truck. So we were in a gambling casino, beautiful place with a pond in the front. I had pictures of all of that. And then when we were finished doing that, I had the key I had to take back, and I'm walking up, and there was snow on the ground. And this little young man came up to me and asked me if I had any extra shoes. And I said, I might have a pair in my well, it's a place where you put your clothes.
Your Foot Locker?
Well, no, we didn't have foot lockers. It was like a cloth. Anyway, and so I went in and I found a pair of slip-on shoes. I hated to give them to him, but I didn't want the poor kid to go, walk in snow with bad shoes. So I gave them to him, and he was going to pay me. And I said, no. I said, I'll tell you what. I will give you these shoes, and I'm going to give you my mother's address. And they asked that if you or your mother would write her a letter and just tell her I'm okay. So he did, or his mother did, and they wrote back and forth for a number of times. That was Rouen, France. Then the bulge occurred, and we were taken by trucks up to railroad, and of all the things to do, they put us in World War I railroad cars. 40 and 8, 40 horses and 8 men, or 8 men and 40 horses, one of the two. And we were in there, and it was cold. We built a fire inside and put rocks around it, and we had small things that we were to try to get enough to heat to keep from freezing to death. So we finally hit our destination, which was not too far. Do you remember the general that they were trapped, and the guy asked him to give up, and he said,
Nuts.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where we went, and we took the pressure off of him, and so did other people, other.
Stone.
Yes, that's it.
In the forest.
Yeah, and we helped them get by, by taking the pressure off of them. And then we went back to, we had some skirmishes and this and that, and we were Regensburg, Germany. We were sent back there, and then we had a lot of things to take German prisoners. And we were short of officers, and we were short of enlisted men, And so I was doing officers' duties, and they had a thing where you could go to officer candidate school. And I said, the last thing I want to do is go to officer candidate school and spend 2 more years over here. So I didn't go, but I was doing officer's duty. Mm-hmm. We had one village, and we captured, about 50 German soldiers. And I had a picture of me sitting on, we had them lined up in groups, about 16, and that's all the police, Army police could take them away. There again, I'm losing the term. And I'm sitting there, and the guy took my picture with my carbine and my helmet, and I lost it. Somebody in my family indiscriminately threw it away. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we did that a number of times. One time we did a thing like that, and I came back, and we were eating chow out on the road, and we were a little late, and I rushed up to eat, and most of the other ones were there and finished with their food. So I got up and sat down, and I started eating my food. And I looked up, and there's little German boys all around us, So I looked up, and the boy looked at me, so I handed him my mess kit. And so I start talking to the fellow sitting across from me on the rocks, and he started laughing, and I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "There goes your mess kit." So the German boy was stealing my mess kit, and I had to get up and chase him. So I got my mess kit back. And after that, we did a few more things in Regensburg, and then there was to be an engineering survey on the west coast of Italy. And there were 2 or 3 places that we were supposed to check out, and I was one of the men to go. I was very pleased, because I'd never been in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
We had been in, France, Germany, Luxembourg, and we went to Austria. One other thing that I thought was, and I didn't know it until later, our outfit was around the town that you made, the big town in...
Bastogne?
No.
Luxembourg?
Down in Germany.
Munich.
Munich. We were not too far from Munich, and we were told to go to Austria, to a certain town, and to keep... watch the men that were going to go into this building. They were the American engineers or whatever, but they were government people. And we didn't know what it was all about. We just there, and we made sure they got in and got out okay. And here what they were, this was Hitler's mother and dad's old house. He left Germany to go to Austria because they thought they could do better financially in Austria. And then, of course, later they left. But I found that out, later. And so time went on, and finally we were called. Instead of making the engineering survey, we were told to go east. And we wound up in France, up in the hills.
Sir, if you're thirsty, we can take a break if you want to.
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
There's Marseille.
Okay.
We were up in the hills in Marseille, and they had camps up there, and they all had names after cigarettes. I don't know whether we were Camels or Markies, Lucky Strikes or what, but we were up there, and then we didn't have much to do and waiting for a call, So I went down into Marseille, and at that time it wasn't too nice. And my daughter, who was she travel agent for some 30 years, she's been there, and she said it's just beautiful. That it's all made over, But anyway, we got. Before I tell you that, the next. I'm sitting there with not much to do, and a fellow walks up, and here it's a guy in our outfit, and I said, "Where you been? I haven't seen you for a long time." He said, I was in the hospital for 5 months. I said, "Boy." And he said, the Germans had a piece where if you triggered it, it would jump, and they called it the bouncing Betty, and it would explode either in your face. And so he was walking by, and he was kind of not too careful with his dress and everything, and he had a can of tooth powder in his back pocket with a toothbrush, and it hit the can and moved back about a foot, and then it exploded, and it really saved his life. He was in the hospital for 5 months, but he came back, and he was lucky. And I said, "Well, what'd you do it all the time you were there?" He said, "I wrote the manufacturer of the tooth powder, and told them what happened, and they sent me a case of tooth powder, free tooth powder." So anyway, we got on the ship, and we were in bad shape. We made gone through everything we did. Oh, I forgot one thing I didn't tell you. We had gone east as far as you can go, and we were in southern Czechoslovakia, and we meet the Russians, and the Russians that we met were Eastern, what's the term? They were not actual Russians, they were Eastern people. And so they gave us some bad vodka, and we took a drink, and the one said, "Hail Stalin," and I didn't like that very much, but I drank. And then they said, "Hail Churchill," and they didn't say anything. And so I finally said, "Hail Roosevelt." And they looked at me, "Who's Roosevelt?" So anyway, but I didn't find out until sometime later, a long time, that north of us toward Berlin, over 1,000 soldiers were captured by the Russians and taken to Russia, and we've never heard from them since. And Lord knows what happened, you know.
I know the Germans were really bad to the Soviets, and the Soviets were hell-bent on revenge.
Yeah. Anyway, we got on the ship, and it's a real small ship, and I can't remember the name of the type of ship it was, but anyway, we're on the Mediterranean, and what a beautiful place. And we're about halfway through, and we're just down. We know that if we go to Japan, we're going to get killed. And they got word that our president dropped a bomb on Japan, ordered. In fact, one of my friends was in one of the Air Force planes that dropped one of the bombs on some of the bombs on Japan. And instead of going to Japan, we went to Boston. And we went to a fort there, and I guess we're there near the dock. So we were there 2 days, and then finally they shipped us to Louisiana, Camp Polk, Louisiana. And then they processed us, and we got to go home for a 30-day leave. And after the 30 days, I checked a few places to go to college. My brother had a car, and it was, still there. He was 5 years in the East, and he worked in the medical, and he couldn't get back from Japan. So after 5 years, he finally did, but that was the only car I could do. So I checked some colleges out to see. So that's when I went back and signed up to go to X. And they told me that in 30 days they were going to, have start courses for the military and so forth. So when I went back to Camp Polk, I finally walked into the colonel one day, and everybody there is wondering whether they can get a promotion and stay or whether they want to get out. And it wasn't protocol, but I walked up to him and saluted and told him that I could go back to college in 30 days, and there were only 3 days left, and I want to get there. And I don't know whether he did or not, but within that period of time, I was discharged. And I went home and then finished Xavier in about 4 years. But that's about it.
Okay.
Well, if we can, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the combat soldiers we've ever interviewed, they remember certain times when they realized that they were involved in some serious business. Was there a time as a young man when you remembered that, oh man, this is life or death stuff that we're dealing with?
Well, there are two. My company commander liked me very much, and he had me doing duty that I shouldn't have to do, but he had to get somebody to do it, and so he asked me. But I had a first sergeant for some reason or other hated my guts. Anyway, he sent me out, what they call it, the foxhole. The closest one, and I had the name. I don't know whether I had it in here or not. But anyway, we were supposed no foxhole that close should have fewer than 5 people. We started out with 3, and when we were checking out to somebody where we're supposed to go, he had a gun, and the shear spring broke and shot him in his foot, and so he couldn't go. So there's 2 of us, and the other fellow with me was in the Army for 30 days, and we were there 12 hours, and he cried most of the time, and we dug a hole where you could go in and put your feet up and sleep a little bit and try to stay as close to warm as you could. But we made it, and we came back, and then when I came back, a man came up to me and oh no, my company commander sent me back to the explosion school, you know. Mm-hmm. And when I came back, the guy looked at me and said, "Klingenberg, where were you?" I said, "I told him where I was," you know. And he said, "Well, we got sent back of the German lines," and he said, "You were supposed to be there, but you weren't there." Mm-hmm. So anyway, after that, where did we go?
So the threat was real then. You knew that every day you were...
Oh, yeah.
And I know the Germans had high-quality machine guns and artillery. They weren't messing around.
They weren't, no. And, when I joined the outfit, I was younger than a lot of the guys that were in the outfit, and was it the SAT where you went to college?
Yeah.
I was too late for that. Mm. And, but there were people in there, and 2 or 3 of them became good friends of mine. They were engineers, and one at over 2 years of engineering school at Notre Dame, and another one went Princeton. And so we had some real smart kids, and I had more rank than they did, but they were good, you know, smart guys, and they were good. They did their job, and and then after that, why I might have skipped something, but that's when we went to Marseille and then back down, and I graduated from X in about 3 or 4 years, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
I have all sorts of things wrong with me, but I'm 94 and I'm still here. Hearing's bad, but the foot and the memory. One time I said, "I've got everything wrong with me except my mind." And then the surgeon he said he could check me out, make sure, and if he could do it, I wouldn't have to go to another one. So we didn't know what to do. My daughter was with me in the hospital, and so we went, and that's when he couldn't help me, and he hit me with a knife, mm-hmm. And that's what caused my problem, and I have dropped foot. That's why I use this, and then
well, if we can, maybe we could talk about life as a combat engineer. You said that you built temporary bridges and had to set explosives.
Oh yeah, I forgot one time when we were at the first Holocaust. Buchenwald. We passed Buchenwald and went to Dachau, and we freed Dachau. And my daughter and her husband went there too, and I talked to another number of people that have been there. We went back to Germany one time, but we never went there. But we built a bridge there, and while we were building the bridge, the Germans tried to blow up the bridge, and we needed some material, and somebody told me that there's a place 26 miles from here where there's an old, like a place that, sold lumber and lumber yard, and this and that. So we got in a car, and we had no doors on either side. And the fellow next to me was from Cincinnati, and he was driving, and I'm on the other side. And we were coming back, and all of a sudden, we saw this plane coming right at us. And I said, hit the brake and turn off the engine. And I dove out of the side, and he dove out of the side. And both of us were safe. But I'll tell you what, I'll never forget it. Those 50 caliber shells were that big. He was a German plane they called Bedcheck Charlie. They were to go up. Our Air Force was so strong that they couldn't do anything much during the day because they were so strong. But at night, near night, while our planes would go back, a lot of it went all the way to England, And but I never got any reward, like I don't think either one of us even told anybody about it, as far as the outfit. I don't know why. I guess we were too busy.
So did you have your own trucks to ride around in, deuces a half, or jeeps, or what kind of vehicles did you get transported in?
Well, we got transported in the regular Army truck, and then I had a smaller vehicle with 5 men in it, and we had special duty to do, and but then, of course, a lot of the times, well, that's what we had, but there was one other thing. Anyway, but well, there was we crossed the big river in Germany. Rhine, not the Rhine. Anyway, the war was about over, so I'm walking up the street, and this friend of mine, he was building a bridge across. There was either the Ilz or the Inn River, and it ran into the I don't know if I got it on here or not. I can't read it. Anyway, a World War I plane came over to strafe him. I looked up. I said, "Bill, jump!" So he dove into the river, and they strafed the bridge. And I was on a sidewalk and stepped back into the buildings, and I was kidding him a lot. And after the war, he went back and went to Indiana University, and he played basketball. And in those days, you couldn't play or start when you were a freshman. But the next sophomore, junior, and senior year, he was in the Big Ten, and he was made the Big Ten, and so I knew that he became a coach afterwards. He coached the town in Columbus, Indiana. Stearman was his last name. And he evidently was really good. And we got together a few times. And I always kidded him about, one other thing, I'm walking down in the front, and there's a German high officer. And you could see he was just full of, he was mad at me and mad at the world, and he was better than anybody else. So I didn't salute him. And I had a thing where the Eisenhower report, that if you got these, you could walk and give yourself up to the American forces. And he had one of those in his hand. And I just stepped by and left him go by, and he kind of grunted when he went by me, and he was mad. But he was in the German Air Force. Whether he got shot down or what, I don't know. But
you mentioned your rifle before. Was it an M1 carbine? Did you have a sidearm? Can you
I
talk
had-
about some of the gear you worked with?
no, I had a carbine,
Okay.
and I didn't have a pistol. And
So you would probably carry explosives and shovels?
we had, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess when we had a certain job to do, we'd have that. But mostly, we just had, we were fighting. We didn't until after the war was about over. Then we did some of the bridges and this and that had to be done. And anyway, I keep not remembering, but we had good men. We really had good men. And while there was one period when we were on the front where we had some real big guys from Texas, and they had to get in the Army, and they were taken, and then they didn't tell anybody until we got on the front that they were only 16 years old. And one of them was 15, but all of them were over 6 foot. And they were laughing at us because they were standing on top of the second floor of this farm when we were on the little hotel. And they were waiting for a truck to take them back, But, it's strange that somebody didn't do a better job of it. I guess they were so interested in taking more people that they didn't catch it. Oh, one other thing I forgot. I'm sorry about this. When we were pulled off the front there, we went to a rest area, and we were in this little village, and it was just packed. So we were stopped. We couldn't move, and I was 12 hours in a foxhole. And so I got out, and I walked about 25 feet away in the shade of a tree, and I sat down and put my helmet over my head. And all of a sudden, I hear some noise, and I heard a voice say, "Who's that SOB sitting under the tree?" And I looked up, and here comes this colonel walking over to me. And on the way over, and the guy said, "Oh, you mean the sergeant?" And he said, "Well, he won't be a sergeant for long." So anyway, I got up and saluted him, and he had to stop. Somebody pulled him away, but I probably would have gotten broken. And after doing nothing but trying to get some sleep, and we found that he sent us a letter of thank you for the good job we did on certain areas, that we had completed and so forth. His last name was Reed, and I understand that he had the lowest score in West Point, but he was a friend of the tank commander. Patton, yeah. So anyway, I almost got, he would have. I know he would have broken me. He was so mad at everything because everything was choked up in there. There were like probably 3 outfits trying to get through one country road, and
So during combat, do you remember getting updates, news from the front? How would you hear about how the rest of the war was going, or would you?
we wouldn't. No. When I went up, the company commander called me up to we were on the Little Moselle River, and they had a farmhouse, and they used that as the headquarters, and we were billeted back in the hills a little bit and this and that. And so I went up, and I'm waiting to get in to see him, and there's a guy with me, and he had been day plus 7 in landing at D-Day. He was D-Day plus 7, and he saw a rabbit going up the hill, and he opened the window and pow, 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 shot at I said, my God, man. And we could have hit the whole, blow us up from across the river. But then they took our place, and then we were on relief, and but a lot of stories. I hope I didn't bore you.
No, we want to ask some more questions if that's okay.
That's fine. If I can answer them, I will.
Okay.
Sure. I guess since you talked a lot about the guys in your unit, did you keep in touch with a lot of those guys after you left, or?
After I left, I tried to. There were like 3 fellows, and from Cincinnati area, and then I was the only one from Kentucky. Of course, the other 2, they were in a different outfit then, so I saw them, back in hometown. But I went around as much as I could to see them, and one was a post office right down on the Ohio River and just outside of Cincinnati. And there was one who lived out by the University of Cincinnati. I can't think of his name. He was an engineer, and he finally went took a job with the engineering outfit up in New York. But we saw a friend from Columbus, Ohio, and then our company commander. And it's funny, he had graduated from West Texas State or something, and he played basketball. He was a pretty big boy. And we met his wife when we had these reunions, and we had them all over the country. And I think twice we had them in Cincinnati. And his wife came with him all of the time. We liked it very much. We took him back to our house, and we had just built a new home in Fort Thomas. And he was really good. And the first thing she wanted my daughter to do was take her to 2, not hamburger, but what Cincinnati and Kentucky, there's hot dogs.
Like the Coney's, Skyline.
Coney Islands, yeah. She heard that back in Texas.
Oh, okay.
So she so my wife took her to 2 or 3 places and ate Coney Islands. But and I also met the guy that was in that foxhole with me. I have a big picture someplace. I don't know whether it's in that box or not, but the pictures that I lost. When we were at Dachau, I was in charge. I told the guys, go in, do what you're supposed to do with water and help anybody that you can. I said, I'm looking around to see if we don't want to get ambushed. So I looked around, and there was 2 flat car railroad cars, and they were filled with nude bodies that were killed by the Germans, and they were, I assumed that they were all, Jewish. And God, and there wasn't anything we could do. And then the next place, there was just one open car like that, and it had a lot fewer bodies on it. But I had pictures of those, and you won't ever forget it. And when we got called back to Dachau that time, we took over a house, and the people came down to the house one night and said, wanted to make sure their house was in good shape. And they start talking about that they didn't know anything about all this, and that they were honest people and this and that. And one guy in our outfit got so mad, he was going to shoot him. So I stopped him, and then they went away, and I said, don't come back until we're out of here. So they did. But
there was a big SS town or camp next to Dachau. I know that a lot of SS officers with their families stayed there. Did you know about the SS? Did they have a reputation?
I knew SS, and I didn't bring it with me, but my cousin sent me a thing of SS that took Belgrade, and guess what his last name was? Klingenberg.
Oh.
And he was SS in the German. Of course, my background, my grandfather came over from Germany with a friend that he didn't like the way I'm sorry.
The way the Nazis were running things?
Yeah. So they got out, and they went through the New York and did all the things that they had to do. And when they got here, my grandfather stayed in Norwood and married another German girl that had come over. And then their last name was Purges. And today, the Purges Concrete Company in Greater Cincinnati is one of the largest over there. And my cousin, who was my age, he's deceased. He was in the Navy, but his 2 sons took over the company, and my cousin, first cousin, he expanded the company, but the 2 boys, and the one that particularly is really amazing. They do so much work. They did double-A highway from across the bridge out. What is the city there? It's the double-A highway anyway. Newport, and then some of the other towns out. And then the other man, he was had a farm. So there was an area up in Ohio that went north, and he was up around that town there. That whole area was filled with a lot of people that came over. And do you know where the guy that was on the moon, and they made that, they had an honor to him, and they had things with his pictures off on that highway up there.
Neil Armstrong?
Yeah.
Or John Glenn?
I'm not sure, one of the 2, but that's where his farm was, up in that area.
Okay.
And we went in that place one time to watch it. But they came over here and they worked hard, and I'm Catholic, and this other fellow that came with my grandfather, he had a granddaughter that became a nun, and here she taught me in the 3rd grade. So anyway,
If we can back up a little bit, do you remember guys taking spoils of wars? I know that Lugers and MG-42s were highly prized back then.
I had 3 guns, and I just kept them in the drawer, and my wife got unhappy with me for being there. I went out and I sold them. I sold them for $300, and I gave them away. Because I can tell you, when I walked out across the street, I sold them in Norwood. I sat in the car, and the guy walked out with the guns, and he's smiling and laughing and waving to a place next door, and he was so happy to get those guns at the price, you know. So but I just got rid of them. I only had them. I think the one you couldn't even find any ammunition for it, you know. One was a German.
So a lot of guys did that. They took stuff and
Oh yeah,
didn't feel bad about it.
They well, that was enemy, and there was either in the army or any place that didn't. We were very good to people's home and everything. We never did anything mean or harmed, and a lot of things there in Germany were stolen from France. I know there was one place we went down, and they had a place as big as, maybe even bigger than this, filled with wine and all sorts of, alcoholic beverages. And one time when my wife went to, one of the wines had a name on it, and my wife went over to Purges in downtown Cincinnati. Here they had that same wine on sale there, and she brought some and brought it home. But the Germans stole all of that. And
I've heard stories of people that will take teeth and bring teeth home with them, gold teeth.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that. Anyway, but I'm glad, I'm happy to be here to tell you, because World War II had such an impact on the rest of the world, and our country today is in deep trouble. I've studied economics and this and that, and we're not running our governments the way they should be. In fact, my economics professor was Dr. Joe Link, and I made straight A's in economics. And when the last class, he was talking to somebody, and he said, "Klingenberg, if you can, wait a minute, I want to talk to you." So I sat down, and finally the last guy left, and I went over and talked to him, and he said, "Have you made things that you want to do in business or anything?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I'm backing the guy to run for Congress, and if he wins, I'm going to go with him and run his office, and I just wonder whether you'd like to go with us." I said, "Yeah, I think I would." But the guy never got, he didn't win the vote, so I laugh and tell myself he probably was honest, so he didn't get elected. But anyway, I hope I didn't bore you.
No, sir, not at all. Casey, did we miss anything?
I think a lot of stuff was covered, originally. Yeah, I think we probably hit everything that we wanted to talk about within the questions itself, so.
Well, it's just nice to be here and talk to somebody. Somebody told me that they're not studying history in schools anymore.
Yeah, I think I've heard that a lot of stuff during World War II is not being covered as widely as it used to. I know when I was in school, we studied that, but I think in these past couple of years, it's not really is something that's
Yeah.
as important, I guess, within teaching, or they seem to want to think
Well,
that.
not just World War II, but a lot of things in history. The Revolutionary War, when they founded the country and things like that. There's so many good things, but why they don't teach them, I don't know.
Well, World War II could have easily been lost if a few things went different.
Absolutely.
I know they sunk all kinds of ships in the early 40s, and Germans ran wild all over Europe until they invaded Russia.
Well, my daughter married a boy from California, and his mother and dad, they were from Chicago, and he was transferred to California, and he sold business equipment. In fact, one of his machines I had in my office, and they came up to our place, and we showed them around. We went out and played golf a couple of times, and we became pretty good friends. And then they invited us to go out to California, and the town, I don't know, but when I took a walk, there was Santa Anita Racetrack 2 or 3 blocks down. So if anybody knows where that is, I'm so forgetful, and it's really rough. But he was a general in the Army, and he was in China. And I ran into another man who wound up in the Pentagon, and we became good friends. And he told me a story about his time in China. And then, of course, he became a brigadier general, and then he went in the Pentagon, whether he got promotions or not. But we met, and there were a 4 couple that the men played golf, and then the women would play bridge, and we had a lot of good times. But he told me the story when he was in China. They were taking command of a bridge and guarding it, and don't leave until they get the word. So he became friends with a priest at this Chinese priest at the local school there, right just on the other side of the bridge. And he went over and talked to him, and then they had dinner together a number of times, and then he met a little nun that taught the grade school. And finally they got word that they should leave, that the Chinese were coming. And he went over to the priest and told him about it, and he said, "Father, you know what's going to happen if you stay." And he says, "Yes, I know, but it's my parish." So both he and the nun, I guess, stayed too. And he was a certain type of priest. Anyway, when I went to Xavier, the order of priests taught over there, and they had their head office somewhere in a little town north of Chicago. And when he told me that, he said he'd like to know whether this priest was still alive. And I said, I know I can find out for you. And so I told a friend of mine, and he told it to the president of Xavier. And the president says, "We're playing UC, and we have a dinner, and I'll sit right next to him, and I'll find out whether whether he could call the place up in Chicago and find out whether that priest was still alive." And so he did, and he told this friend of mine, and who worked for UC. And he said, no, his name is there, but there's no information. So if his name was still there and there's no information, he was definitely killed. It's a sad story, you know. But, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk too much.
No, please.
No, you're fine.
I even have another question for you if you're up for it.
Sure.
Before World War II, did you know a lot about World War I? Was that taught a lot? Did you know who was fighting who? Did that really factor into World War II all that much?
No, I don't think it had anything to different. One of the relatives on my mother's side of the family, he was in World War I, but so many of them, they weren't in actual combat over there. But anyway.
But by the time World War II rolled around, World War I was a distant memory?
I'd say so, yeah. Yeah, I think as it is here. I bet you could talk to people 20, 30 years old and couldn't give you an answer about it, you know. But there were a lot of good men, and a lot of them didn't come home. And so...
Well, we certainly appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And your service.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll...
Let me go see if your nurse is